Well, a very good morning, good evening, good afternoon to you, wherever you might be in the world. Obviously, here in Perth, WA, we're on Sunday. Sometimes, in fact, quite often more recently, I've tried to record these videos in advance, because that leave it till the last minute and then things end up happening and interrupting, and I'll fall way behind schedule. Anyway, I have actually fallen behind schedule this week for a number of reasons, but I will talk to you very briefly about that in the near future, and then I'll explain where we're going. Okay, so in the first instance, if you're new to the channel, I'm Anna. I own the channel here. If you call it ownership, it's just a place where I share my information and the knowledge that I've picked up along the way. And this information that I share could be based on my metaphysical work that I've been doing for the last 25 years, or alternatively, it could come from the evidence-based stuff, which is my Bachelor of Social Work or my Masters of Counselling. It could be either, but I like to really outline very clearly when I'm drawing upon which area of expertise, because of course that's very important and part of professional ethics and integrity. Now, obviously, before I get into that, there's a lot to talk about today because it's been such a busy week. But obviously, I would really enjoy hearing from you, hearing if you're a local, hearing if you're from overseas, what the weather is like, and if there's any questions or responses or anything that you would like me to comment on as part of the yarning goes. So please feel welcome. And if you disagree with anything I say, remember everything is my opinion, my beliefs, and I'm open to correction. So feel free to say whatever it is that you would like to say. Now, before I get into anything else, let's have a quick recap of the Tarot and Tea night. So I must say, if you watched the previous videos, I was a little unimpressed by a couple of the responses because I've only just started redoing these locally and delivering them at the local community centre. And so I got some, well, I suppose it would be called negative critical feedback, in as far as I felt it was a little bit unreasonable. Not that the feedback wasn't valid, but either way, I took it on board, which was essentially, we want more, okay? It's not enough to have the social interaction. They wanted me to provide more information, more strategy on how to do tarot readings, which I felt was unreasonable because, of course, when you're hosting a gathering, it's very difficult to be more than one person at the time. And if you're hosting, you generally have to interact. And of course, I advertise this as a social event as opposed to a teaching workshop. But either way, I did take it on board and I thought, okay, this particular event that I've run, I had a couple of return visitors and I just want to acknowledge them because that was wonderful. It's very emotionally rewarding. But I also put together pamphlets and leaflets on basic energy work, which you can find on the channel here, by the way. It's things like centering and grounding, how to put protection on your aura, protection on you, and of course, my favourite, spiritual hygiene. So anyway, those packs were available and it was a really interesting group. We had... for example, there was a couple of Peruvian backpackers that arrived. They're not going to be staying local, but they certainly turned up and they were lovely. Turns out they're going to keep travelling along. Two of the beautiful souls, one was a return visitor, is into healing energy. He's a didge player. We call it a didge player. He plays the didgeridoo. And we had another one that was into Buddhist mantras and the chanting, the Tibetan mantras. And so I can see on the radar there will probably be an option down the track. We'll discuss it on running a music circle or something like that on a different day. And potentially, if we have it at the same venue, we wouldn't have it at the room that we have the tarot and tea in. There's another bigger room out the back. So we might look at that. Then there's another gorgeous lady. These people, I'm pretty sure if they watch this, they'll know that I'm talking about them. She brought along some of her crystals for me to identify. So point of clarification here. I'm not a geologist, I'm not a gemologist, and I am not in any way, shape or form qualified with a piece of paper, or even as a chemist, to turn around and actually name or identify a crystal that somebody brings to me like that. And if you're watching the other videos that come along, I can get a pretty good idea because if I've handled these crystals before and I've been around them. But that doesn't mean to say that I will always be right. I can also make mistakes with this. So I wouldn't be considered a credible, oh gosh, what do you call them? I can't remember. You know what I mean? Expert anyway. So bearing in mind that with this, the business that I can look at a crystal and I can see certain things about it, like to put this into perspective, she showed me a green crystal. Is it real? Yes, I could tell it was a real rock. It wasn't plastic. It was not. It didn't appear to be synthetic to my eye. It appeared to be a genuine green crystal. But was it green calcite or was it green fluorite? I'm not really 100% sure because they present in different ways, and it was only a very small sample of the crystal that had been turned into a gem. So that much I can work on. But we also talk about the fact that, when it comes to a specific crystal, they don't all grow, because let's say crystals grow, they don't all grow the same way. So for instance, you can have amethysts, which are genuine amethysts. They can come as geodes, they can come as points, clusters, even the amethyst flower, and so on. And unless I've actually seen them before, and it's easy to identify them for a layperson, because I would be considered a layperson, then anything that I contribute is really only going to be my opinion. I can actually suggest, if it's important to you, that maybe you go and get it expertly qualified. Before I move on to the next slide, I want to make mention and acknowledge Kerry and Karina specifically by name, because they were so incredibly helpful for me at this event as well, and at the last one with Alana's, lifting and all the rest of it, and just helping me get the room set up so that people can actually enjoy the whole atmosphere and in the environment. So thank you very much, Kerry and Karina. So speaking of crystals, of course, I display them, and they are for sale. People can purchase them when they come down to these events, but I display them anyway so that people can come into close contact with them. They can see them, they can identify what they would like, what they feel resonates with them, all of that kind of thing. It's about handling and seeing these crystals. Now, anyway, speaking of them, I have been importing quite a lot from overseas at the moment, despite this horrendous exchange rate between the Aussie dollar and the US dollars. And most of the people overseas, the suppliers, they sell in US dollars. So I'm starting to amass quite a few of them. So when I say that you can purchase them from me if you come down to these events, they will be marked off at 20% discount, at least, actually, depending on what's going on. And this is because for me to keep bringing in new crystals for you to look at, then I've got to actually keep purchasing them. So this week, what I've had come in is some absolutely stunning citrine points and some blue labradorite towers as well. So when I say points, they're more than a point. They're more like a small tower. This is the citrine and the labradorite. They're both about the same size, about 5 to 6 centimetres long. And this is because I've got such an excellent supplier overseas at the moment who gives me a very good price. And when I can get a good price, that means I can pass that saving along to you guys as well. So the other things that I've bought is actually because I recognise, and I'm going to do this promotion, that people buy tumbles instead of the jewellery, because there is so much waste involved with carving crystals to make pendants and all the rest of it, and even the bracelets. Sometimes actually making bracelets and beads is a good way to use crystal that might otherwise not have any other practical use, if that makes sense. But what I'm doing is I'm actually buying more of the macrame necklaces that I wear, and I pop tumbles in so that I can interchange very easily what crystal I want to work with each day. Now, just a bit of future notice, speaking about crystals to work with, where I've actually gone out on a limb a little bit is I have become aware of a crystal that is quite affordable, but it has some incredible properties. And I'm going to hold off before I tell you about that one, because I think I might leave that as a big announcement, because it's actually quite exciting news. Stepping away from talking about crystals and onto different topics, because otherwise this video is going to be very long, I'm very mindful of that. There's a couple of things that come up at the tarot groups when I end up interacting with other people and talking with them, and I think, yeah, I can make a mention of this in the yarning. So for today, one of the things that has come up is the concept of sacred numbers. Many people know these as what they call angel numbers or celestial numbers, and I just thought I would put into perspective that I was introduced to them many, many years ago, actually through my dreams, as sacred numbers. When I started trying to research and find out what these numbers meant, then I found them listed as sacred. And then I think around about 2010, I started to find them online referred to as angel numbers. And just for the record, I don't get paid anything for promoting this website here, but I am going to promote it because it has come up at Tarot and Tea, not the website, the fact with the numbers, is that this particular website is actually run by an Australian woman, or created by an Australian woman. And from where I sit, it tends to be the most accurate. It's very in-depth, it's very expansive, it's a massive website, and it's been there for a number of years. And so therefore, I like to recommend people to go and take a look at this. It's free. I understand that the woman who created the website has 2 adult daughters, and all 3 of them are psychic. So either way, if you're seeing consecutive numbers, as here I've put up the number 444, and this is because one of the ladies that came along to the tarot night, she had 3 cards pulled for her, and it was all the 4s. So that was an additional message that if I'd been more, I suppose, focused on what was going on with her, I could have actually given her this information then, which anyway I forgot because I was hosting, not providing a service. Hopefully she'll see this on here and go and look at Sacred Scribes website. I'll put the name of the website in there later because I can't see it on here now as I'm talking to you. But anyway, that is a brilliant website. I recommend most people look at it. And the 444, the 444, is actually bodes very well for the lady. Now, another conversation that came up that's quite relevant was, well, I think to most people, is one about embracing the shadow and doing some shadow work. Now, if you're not familiar with that term, what that means is basically they reflect very deeply on their own behaviours, their thoughts, their reactions, their triggers, and all the rest of it. So it's digging very deeply as part of healing themselves. It's called, in some ways, unpacking themselves, looking at them, and then processing the information that they find. Now, what I find, and I will say most definitely based on my training, which is evidence-based, is I find it a little bit disturbing for a number of reasons. The lady has identified that she's got deep-seated trauma, childhood trauma, and she experiences what we call emotional dysregulation, which is her moods fluctuate. And she's also identified that I've got to be careful with, obviously, terminology here when we're talking about putting stuff on YouTube, so you might have to use your imagination a little bit. She's identified that she's experienced end-of-life desire at different times, so work that out throughout her past. So we would, in professional circles, consider her to be a little bit of a high-risk person to actually go into this digging deep state. There's a number of reasons why, and I will explain it in a little while. But let's first of all talk about what we mean by shadow work, because we don't mean doing shadow puppetry, and we don't mean shadow dancing or working out in the shadows like these videos here. I'm also trying to make light of a pretty dark subject, actually, or potentially a dark subject. Now, I do like to use visual imagery to demonstrate things sometimes, because I think when we have a visual image, for those people that are challenged with imagery, if you like, having a creative imagination and that kind of thing, it helps them to understand and put things into perspective. So when we talk about the shadow aspect of self, we're talking about the idea that during our day-to-day living and our functioning, that there are aspects of ourselves that remain hidden beneath the surface. They are our subconscious motivators, and these can be the beliefs that keep us locked in these negative patterns and cycles. And when I say negative, I mean unhelpful or unhealthy styles. For example, and I'll try and use some examples here, that, if somebody struggles with perhaps addiction or has got extremely low self-confidence, abandonment issues or whatever, there is a belief that this is sitting underneath the surface and informs why we act as we do. So if we've got really large emotional reactions such as aggression or hysteria or whatever, then the idea is that once we recognize what that issue relates to, then we can heal it. Now, there is a truth to that, by the way, but when we talk about metaphysical, everything, when I say there's a truth, it's true, but there's ifs and buts, okay? But when we talk metaphysically about this stuff, we're talking about raising our vibration by sending light into these dark areas, which are going to be unpacked. Okay, I'll try and explain a little further on the next slide. So once again, I'm going to point out some problems with the concept, which, by the way, can be navigated, okay? And the same with this image here. From both a metaphysical and from a scientific or evidence-based perspective, the idea is that shadow work is approached from a space that the shadow, which is that subconscious stuff, is separate to us. So we're talking about bringing and unifying the aspects of self together. But if we approach the idea of shadow work, it's a little bit of, or quite often the risk is, it's a little bit like this image here. The shadow actually has no substance to it. It's, even with this particular image, which I think is good, this isn't a shadow, this is a curtain and somebody is standing behind it. So it gives an appearance of being real, but the shadow aspect, there's a flawed logic, shall we say. The shadow exists most definitely, we can't deny that. But it is, I don't see it as that difficult for it to become lightened up. And this is just my approach to it, okay? My belief is that the shadow is there. It never, ever goes away. It changes depending on what we're actively doing in our life, and depending on the time of the day or the time of our life, where we're at in our life. You know, sometimes the shadow aspect, you know, and these can be the attributes of ourselves that we actually know the cause of. You know, we might know that our behaviours are related to abandonment issues or whatever, but we choose to continue, shall we say, with these behaviours that are unhelpful, or to try and repress them and push them down and deny that they exist, okay? But the bottom line is, the shadow's always there. I'm just looking at my notes. Sometimes you can barely see it, okay? It's in a state of perpetual change. And the thing I think that I take a little bit of issue with the idea of this whole prospect of I'm going to do shadow work is, if it's this, we're going to pull parts of ourselves out, pick them up, hold them up to the light, take a look at them, and then pack it away because we've made it feel better. To me, if we saw a child outside, and we always see them when they first become aware of that they actually literally have a shadow, as we see in this video here, we would be laughing at them if they were running around trying to catch their shadow. We'll be saying to them, if you're going to try and catch your shadow, you are going to be at this all day. You're never going to catch your shadow. And the reason is because the shadow has no substance. And so I think metaphorically, this is the same for when we talk about shadow work of the personality. When we are stopped and focused on digging into the subconscious and pulling stuff to the surface as best we can, the reality is we're standing still and we're still stuck. We're not actually moving forward on the path. I hope that articulates what I was trying to say, and that if you want me to expand on it, I'm happy to. And I have to be careful with how I phrase the next bit, because it's so easy for people to misinterpret a message, if you like, or the conversational aspects. So this is what I think, and I'm going to be, here is what I think is a better option, and then followed by and there is this to consider as well. Okay, so for me, the best way to actually do shadow work is through movement, right? And awareness and paying attention. So if we look at this image here, we can see that if this woman was to stand still and not move, and you will see, because this video is going to play, that she continues to move her head. So she's in a constant state of motion, and she moves in and out of the shadows, and the shadows at different times are going to block certain features. Now, the thing is with humans, when we're doing our own, if you want to call it shadow work, this inner reflection, while we're moving, that shadow doesn't stick. We don't become stagnant. But every now and again, okay, when we come into the light, let's say if she was paying attention, she might see as that right eye comes into the light, she might become aware that actually there is a mark there. There might be some mud or some dirt there that she's got to take some action with. She's actually got to clean that away for that reflection to be pure, shall we say. So there's an action associated with creating change. But the thing is as well that, it's all about choices, and it's all about movement. So the little bit that I wanted to do there is a but, okay, if you continue to move and you are moving too fast and you're not paying attention and you're not being aware of what's going on for you and around you and within you, then you're actually going to be moving too fast and not give yourself time to actually see those little bits. And this is where I guess we constantly say, or we are constantly told in the course of our growth and development, is to create the space, create the time for that inner reflection through meditation. And that is a far more gentle way for anything that it needs to be resolved, as in the mud on the eye to be cleaned, that will come to the surface and you can just clean it and deal with it and it's done with. Okay, that's what I tend to think. But there is a big however. And I guess in this particular slide, we're talking about metaphysical meeting the physical, meeting the evidence-based, okay? Or what do they call it? Theosophy or theosophical science? I can't remember now. It's not important. Anyway, translating this information that I'm giving to you for practical daily assistance is that when we're embracing the shadow, we're actually accepting that part of ourselves that we would actually rather not acknowledge, which it could be, for example, if you've got very abrupt speech, if you are a person that's quick to react and get angry, and you don't like those aspects of yourself, so you'll actually ignore it. You'll bury your head in the sand and refuse to acknowledge it. But when we become aware of it, this is where we get our free will and our choice. We can make a decision about how we're going to move forward in our lives. So, for example, if we're talking about a behaviour, then we're talking about repatterning, behavioural repatterning, if I can speak, behavioural repatterning. And whatever repatterning that we're doing, some of it's going to be fairly easy to do, such as, I'm just going to wipe the mud off my eye, or I'm going to spend more time on X or Y. But when it's the really deep embedded stuff, which is associated with, I think, the modern New Age concepts around shadow work and embracing the shadow, oh gosh, gee, I've lost my train of thought. One moment. There is actually contraindications about that. I'll talk about them in a moment. I've got my train of thought back. I'll check my notes. Anyway, what I did find is that in my notes, I've put that my recommendation, what I believe is a better way of addressing the shadow work, is paying attention to the mirror. And some people might say, what are you talking about, the mirror? The mirror is quite often in the people around us. It's our children, it's our loved ones. It's when we see things that people might do, and it can be very, very simple stuff. It doesn't have to be heavy. And we realise that that creates something within us. And this is why you will often hear people say things like, pay attention to your levels of discomfort, because your discomfort is your early warning signals that there is a reaction within you. And so when somebody does something that makes you feel uncomfortable, then we reflect on it. Okay, and then we take a look, well, why does that make me feel uncomfortable? A prime example of this, and I was telling this lady about this the other day, is many years ago, a woman that I knew, she took real issue to anybody that rolled their eyes. That became a trigger for her. And that was related to her past, her childhood, and obviously I think it tended to be associated with over-discipline by a parental figure or something like that. I don't know, I'm stretching now, it was such a long time ago. But when we become aware that, if the person, let's say that lady was in front of me today and I rolled my eyes at her, well, she might associate that with a risk of violence to her. The reality is I'm not that person. I'm not going to be violent towards her. And so her role there is to be able to let go of the fact that anybody that's an eye roller is potentially a violent person or being hurtful to her. For some people, eye rolling is actually habitual. Actually, to be honest, I'm a bit of an eye roller myself, and I'm thinking I don't get offended by eye rolling because I actually associate it with humour. So I've got a different association with that particular thing, for example. So I hope I'm portraying that correctly. I want to get into the cautions because otherwise it'll be too long a video. So when it comes to behavioural and thought repatterning, quite often it's too big for a person to do on their own, and there's no shame with that. If it's long embedded stuff, sometimes people need to attend a qualified and competent therapist as part of their healing and recovery journey. Now, I can assure you, having done the training, that if you have, as this woman I stated at the beginning, has a long history of trauma, including some deeply embedded other issues that I mentioned, no competent therapist is going to be asking you to unpack your trauma and to really dig deep into it, because that can actually be dangerous. It's got contraindications to it, especially when the person has got that history of the will to live issues. Okay. And this is because, just for your information, it is because for these people with these deep embedded traumas, when they start to look and unpack, they actually go back into that mindset. They start to relive and re-experience emotionally the pain and suffering that they had back in the past. Now, that is when it becomes very, very high risk, okay? Because if they've got those really big PTSD symptoms, that can actually involve what they call rumination, and that's sitting around and just thinking and thinking and thinking. They get stuck in it. So it would actually be really remiss of a therapist to encourage a person with trauma to dig deeply like that. And I know for a fact that when it comes to working with these kind of people, this is why it's so important that people be qualified, is that part of the healing journey is to acknowledge the pain and the suffering and the deed. We don't invalidate it, that happened, but we work in different ways to support a person to full recovery. So the red alert comes in actually with the rumination aspect, especially if there's been that will to live stuff. If they start living it, I'm just looking at my notes here because I'm actually abbreviating them. Okay, so in a real life scenario with a competent and qualified therapist, they would obviously not ignore the pain and suffering, but it would kind of be glossed over, unless, right, there's an unless you are supported when you get home, because the reality is the memories can come flooding back. If not in that 1 hour session with your therapist, it can happen after you go home. And so you might need to isolate from other people as you unpack and process. And now, on the other hand, you might need to have somebody close to you in the same house nearby while you do the unpacking and processing, but understands and respects that you need personal space, but they make sure that you're safe, especially if there's been that lack of will to live stuff going on. So you've got that safety net there. Now, the other thing is too that a good support team at home is going to know, hopefully, if they don't know now, maybe they will by the end of this thing, that while you're taking that space out, it's just to reassure you, I'm here. I'm here when you want to come out, I'm here. And then give you a couple of hours or so, maybe not that long, actually, just depends on the person, but, going in and then trying to encourage you to come out and to walk or to go outside and be in nature together with them or whatever, because these are healthy behaviors and healthy managing techniques and strategies for when the trauma starts to peak. Especially walking will help to be a distraction, which is obviously what you need by the time you get to a certain point. It's fine to visit, there is a truth to that saying. It's okay to go back and visit the past, but you don't want to get stuck there. And this is the problem with trauma, is that it's very easy to fall back into the abyss and to get stuck there, and then it becomes harder to get out. So this is one of the reasons why we'd be very careful about having somebody do shadow work where there's a history of trauma. So anyway, when all is said and done, sorry, I had to take a little break there. I'm back now if there's a change in my tone. Sorry about that. When all is said and done, what I have found to be the best way, whether a person's got trauma or not, when it comes to the embracing the shadow aspects of self, is actually just to monitor the mirror, monitor the reflection. And when you notice and become aware of behaviours that are unhelpful, it doesn't matter where it comes from where I sit. It's the recognition that it doesn't help you where you are now. And then the way, so I guess I was taught many years ago that we can, where our free will is involved, we can choose to create or we can choose to react to circumstances. You can call it a trigger if you want. It's up to you. But we have choices in how we respond to situations. And when we recognize that our responses are inappropriate, unhelpful, or unhealthy, then we can make a conscious choice to say, I'm going to release that now. I'm going to change it as of right now. From now on going forward, I choose to live with love, with light, to be positive and creative, and to release the unhelpful traits with gratitude. Okay, so the gratitude is a key factor as well. This is the acknowledgement that the behaviors that we have that are unhelpful are learned ones. They are not of divine, they are not the truth of who we are. They are learned and picked up along the way from our environmental circumstances, and they've been defensive and protective mechanisms in most instances. Another tip, though, as well, is to recognise well, there's two parts to this, okay? There is the recognition and acceptance of self for who we have been, and recognition and acceptance that we can actually do better, and we will do better because we can choose that. The other thing is to recognise that no person walks through life without being hurt or without hurting people when we've got a physical existence. It seems to be the nature of life. And as much as you've been hurt, there will have been people that have hurt you, you've hurt them. Sorry, my phone just went off. And so it becomes a case of forgiving both yourself and others so that we can experience love more fully. Now, being aware too, forgiveness, I always come back to, it doesn't mean saying that what somebody has done is okay. It just means not to allow our heart to become hard, embittered, and fearful. So I can expand on that if people want me to on another day. So, leaving the intensive shadow work conversation behind, let's now talk about crystals because I love talking about crystals. I have had lots happening. As previously stated, I think I've said this in this video. The connections that I'm making with people overseas, suppliers who are being very kind to me as far as giving me information about the materials that they use, where they source them, how they manufacture them, and all of this kind of stuff, and also giving me some wonderful prices. So I've got information to share on that. I won't have a lot of time to talk about it today, but I can actually share with you. Yesterday I had a little bit of an incident, shall we say, and I realised that my little world had been rocked, as you do, we're human, and I thought, you know what I need a crystal. So I went to my crystal collection and sort of browsed amongst it, and I saw some rhodonite that I've been clearing for me because I've never worked with it before. Okay, that's the bottom line. I love it, it's pretty, but I've never actually worked with rhodonite before. So I've had it sitting there charging on my selenite for at a time when I might need it. And as it happened yesterday, I put it on, and I can tell you, I actually experienced that in incredible ways. In the first instance, from the moment I put it on, I started to feel energy. Obviously, my self-esteem had been rocked before I put it on. My little inner baby was having a little bit of getting ready for a weep and a cry and a sook, really. So suffice to say, the first thing I felt was energy. Then I went and sat outside because I thought I'm just going to have a quiet moment and see if I can feel within myself, the energy movement, see what's going on there. And then I realised that I was actually being infused by the pink of the rhodonite. So this is me getting into my metaphysical and energy work. So what I would say is I never realised how powerful rhodonite is, but rhodonite is an extremely powerful crystal. And what happened next, I'm not revealing too much, obviously, about my family workings. It was a situation that was occurring between myself and my adult daughter. Now, let's just say within about an hour of me putting on the rhodonite, I had a wonderful, beautiful, beautiful conversation with her. And I would put it in the category of miracle, actually. It was unexpected and it was absolutely lovely. So there you go. For those of you that have been watching the videos, you will be aware that I put up the Nuumite video, I think a couple of weeks ago, and the genuine Nuumite actually doesn't have the blue flash that we see here. It's got the golden flash and it comes from Greenland, in a nutshell. I believe the ones with the blue flash actually comes from Canada. I don't think it's called Nuumite. I can't really remember because Nuumite is supposed to be a trademark name for the particular crystal that comes from Greenland, right? Where I'm going with this is Nuumite is super duper expensive, and I have actually found a source. I have got a supplier overseas, and it's much cheaper, but it's got the same ingredients as what Nuumite does. And even the Canadian stuff, as I recall, was super expensive. This stuff is a lot more affordable. And let me just say, I will be doing a video about it in the near future. At the moment, it's fairly cheap. I'm a little concerned once I start referring to it as the Magician's Stone, because that's not what it's known as now. But from a mineral makeup, it is the same as Nuumite, apparently, which is called the Magician's Stone. Just in case you were wondering, or the Stone of the Magician, Stone of the Philosopher. This is the same as this other crystal that's got a different name. So obviously I've bought large quantities of that, including a tower for myself, because you know what, I can afford to buy a tower of the other one that is Nuumite by a different name. Now, as for what's happening on the crystal playlist, you will have seen this week that green Aventurine has gone up. That has I don't have any in my collection besides a couple of little tumbles that I think are probably what we would call triple lower grade. I was just trying to think. If A grade is top grade, these ones aren't top grade. They would be like third or fourth grade stuff. But anyway, I want to get some more really good quality green Aventurine. So I also put up the video for blue Aventurine. That's on the Crystal Magic playlist. Now that one challenged me. The reason why that one was late, if people haven't watched it, was because I reached a bit of a stonewall there when doing the buying tips of identifying fraud from the genuine article. And this is because, obviously, as I've said before, crystals present in different colours and that kind of thing. And online, I had read that anything with stripes actually was fake. Well, I've been able to establish that actually isn't the case, that perhaps there was, let's just say we can be experts, but we're all developing all the time. So anyway, suffice to say, I had an amazing conversation with a supplier who is verified, who works with blue Aventurine. They do the carvings, and they use the stripe carvings. And there goes my phone again. I'm just going to ignore the phone and push on through. And speaking of interesting numbers, I've just noticed on my computer the time is 10:10. Anyway, look, next week the plan is that I will load blue Dumortierite in a timely way with a bit of luck. It will go up on Tuesday, following on from Aventurine, the blue Aventurine. And then on Thursday, sticking with the blues, the intention is to load the video on Angelite, which is another considered to be very high vibration crystal. I love the blues. Blues is something that I'm very much drawn to and attracted to. So yes, anyway, that one will go up on Thursday. Now, if you're new to the channel, just a reminder that I've got a number of different playlists for people to look at. Look, I'm aware that I've got a bit of a drony voice. If you can push on past it and get through it, you know, I've got the timing chapters in the videos. You can jump from space to space to see what is interesting to you. The universal law, the spiritual law stuff, I feel is actually really quite interesting for personal growth and expansion. And what I would do is encourage people, rather than to look at it and go, well, therefore, you know, it's a law, I'm going to live by that. Actually reflect on whether it feels right to you. Start to work on your own connection with your guides and your guardians. And then when you look at this kind of content, you can actually do what does it feel right? Does it feel right to you? And sometimes the thing is as well, when we feel or meet with new information, sometimes it doesn't feel right to us the first time we look at it, and down the track it starts to resonate more with us and we feel that it's more accurate. I'm even the same with some of the universal spiritual law stuff that I put up. There is information on there that I'm not 100% sure of at this point in time, but I don't see it as something to really lose sleep over. You know, when the right time comes, the right time comes. But otherwise, look, there is the content on angels, how to access and harness the energy of the angels and work with them, bring that love and light into your life. There's also work on, or videos on colour. There's videos on numerology. The numerology content is basically an online workshop. That is what I would deliver if I was delivering an online workshop, with the exclusion of, I don't teach people how, not on the channel, how to identify what the past life karma is that a person brings into this life, although that can be calculated based on the birth numbers. Anyway, considering how much content we've covered today, I think I've done pretty well for me to actually stay below this time frame. Anyway, look, I'm going to say, look, love you, leave you. Thank you for being part of my journey. I hope to catch up with you in the future. Feel free to make a comment. Let me know where you are. Let me know if there's content that you want me to visit on here. I'm open to all of it. Until the next time, though, I'm going to say have a blessed day, blessed week. Take care. Catch you on the next one. Bye-bye for now.